Chapter 3. The clock struck the midnight hour. Bishop Quarcoopome sat stiffly on the edge of his modest wooden bed. He had been sitting in that position for nearly 2 hours. Slowly he stirred and, placing his feet in his slippers, he walked purposefully across to his wife's room. He knocked 3 times on the door, but there was no response, and reluctantly he opened the door without invitation. Intrusion was against his principles, and he felt a pang of guilt as he stood in the open doorway looking down on the peacefully sleeping form of his wife. He turned on the light and Mrs. Quarcoopome woke abruptly. "Ishmael," she said, blinking, "you startled me." "I am sorry, my dear, I didn't mean to." "Are you so soon asleep?" he asked, as if he found it difficult to believe that anyone could sleep with such troubles on their mind. "Yes, I think I have been sleeping soundly for nearly an hour." She sat up. He moved the stool from the dressing table and sat directly opposite her. Attempting to gather his thoughts, his glance ranged around the room, finally resting on the dressing table, an anachronism from 25 years ago which housed his wife's modest cosmetic collection, dusting powder, a jar of skin cream, a small bottle of perfume and a comb. Perfect moderation, he thought to himself. It was always her way. Managing to focus on his thoughts now, he directed an electric glance at his wife, an indication that in some way he was not pleased with her. She did not like such looks, which invariably, when they came, made her nights sleepless. "Did you see Mary come in?" he asked her abruptly. Mrs. Quarcoopome replied that she had. "When did she come?" "A little after 11. "Did they drive into the churchyard?" her husband continued with his searching cross-examination. He was well aware that he hurt his wife with such taunting and obvious questions, but that was the only way he could get to the bottom of the truth. He repeated his question insistently. "Did they drive into the churchyard?" "Yes, they drove quietly into the yard." "Why ask? Then some priest or sister might have spotted them." "Ishmael, that doesn't matter. They were doing nothing wrong. Don't you trust your daughter?" "It matters." They came in at 11, sat in the car until 1:15 and then stood in front of the gate for at least another 50 minutes. It took them 5 minutes to walk to the front door. "It is true that Mary is the doctor's special patient, but I dislike this degree of specialty. It appears to me that all too soon the doctor is abusing the privileges we have offered him, and I think he is doing this largely because you have been pushing your daughter into his lap without any real thought for her welfare. It must not continue. I want the young man to cure my daughter, and simply that." The anger was present in her shaking voice. "And how long have we known the doctor?" he asked, still refusing to refer to Charles by name. "One evening and one afternoon only," his wife answered sarcastically. He lowered his voice, but it was charged full of meaning. "Yes." He paused, looking out of the window, then turned back towards her, his face softer now, but his expression still serious and deeply concerned. "But Zandria, that is not the only reason why I have woken you. I am here because 19 years ago I listened to you as you preached against my own reasoning, but what I said all that time ago is now coming true. When we were going to adopt Mary, the first told you that she, like all human beings, would grow up and ask questions. One day, as I have reminded you before, some okra mouth will spill the beans to her. I still believe that, despite religion, we should have performed the customary rites necessary to placate evil, otherwise the devil himself will tell her the truth someday. I may be wrong, but something tells me that through these attacks of hers, here and now, the devil is telling Mary in plain language where she belongs. I haven't slept soundly these past 3 weeks just thinking about the time bomb we have been sitting on so unconcernedly, thinking it will only explode after eternity. No, Zandria, no. Now the final hours are ticking away fast, and the truth must be faced. Mary is descended from the..." He stopped abruptly. "What is it?" Zandria whispered. "I thought I heard a noise coming from Mary's room." "I did too. I think she was only turning in bed." "Zandria, I have come to a decision," he said, looking at her for encouragement and support. "I have decided to give the doctor all the information we have about Mary, all that we have so far hidden from him. I think it will put him in a better position to help her, if anyone can. I have been pondering over that too. But don't you think it is too early and rather dangerous? Listen carefully. Things have gone too far already. If we continue to hide vital information, we may be doing the poor girl further harm. If you are thinking that the information may put the doctor off your daughter, I simply do not care. And anyway, if the young specialist is genuinely in love with my daughter, he will stay to help her even if she is a crank. We say for better or for worse. This is my decision, my dear, and I hope that you can understand and agree with it. Good night. Bending to kiss her forehead, he silenced her with his determination. Turning away, he returned to the edge of his bed, fixed his jaws in his palms and sat, pondering deeply on into the night. Sometimes his brows contorted, and he bit deeply into his lower lip, then sighed, shaking his head as if to send morbid thoughts away. But all too soon the nagging thoughts came flooding back again. Eventually, when the clock struck 2, he numbed his troubled mind and turned to sleep. His prayers had not provided the comfort for which he had hoped. Sitting, staring straight ahead at nothing, Charles mentally reviewed Mary's case. After a few minutes he rose from the bed and walked to the east-facing window, pulled away the heavy curtains and looked out at the sky. Surveying the heavens had been a habit at school and at college, where the other students had called him the astrologer with answers from the sky. The clock behind him struck the midnight hour. Now, pacing the room, he murmured his thoughts out aloud. Mary, Mary, my dear Mary, you are a mystery. You have the symptoms of a paranoid, but there is a little something missing. I don't understand why your attacks are timed precisely at 2:20 p.m. on Sundays. Why 2:20 p.m., and why Sundays? I would have dismissed that as sheer coincidence, but there is a third mystery. Paranoids do not vomit yellow substances, which chemistry is at a loss to describe, a substance that baffles the known chemistry of the Homo sapiens. All my medical knowledge seems to be failing me. It is incredible. Even so, a fourth mystery is even more tantalizing than the third. Why do you lapse into strange incantations during your attacks, known only to the high fetish priest? As far as your parents are aware, this disorder started only a few weeks ago. All the same, I can't help feeling that your dear parents are hiding something, that they have a story to tell. I am sure they have a secret or a piece of information related to you and your troubles that could help to set this jigsaw puzzle right. I think a little gentle arm twisting might yield the information, but the dean asked me to go slowly. I must take care, but by now they should realize that I have a right to know, no matter what. Worry and determination to succeed were written on his face. He cast a glance at the wall clock. Time was simply flying by and he felt helpless. He crossed over the room to his bookcase and chose 2 volumes, one by the late psychiatrist Émile Krupilla, who had died in 1926, and the other by the great Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung. The latter asserted that schizophrenia is usually caused by intense repressive activity and by an abnormal resurgency of primitive tendencies, evolutionary throwbacks from what he called the person's collective unconsciousness. The description seemed to fit Mary. He returned to his bed and pushed the lampshade nearer. Soon he was absorbed in Carl Jung's doctrine. Outside, the slow moon was nearing its horizon. The bishop's wife sat erect on her bed. From her mouth her thoughts escaped in soft tones. To say the least, Mary has always been a good girl, always obedient, at home and elsewhere. Her school reports always read, obedient and exemplary. She has always been open to me like a book, so that I can read her innermost emotions. But this new turning point is beyond imagination. Can it be the dev? It could be, by God, it cannot be. He cannot share her with us, but everything points that way. Why else does Charles' medical knowledge appear to be ineffective? Shall I tomorrow find out from the chi? No. These days, with the surveillance of gossipy people and the same free extrovertism extending to the press, I would be the sensation of the year if I were found out. Come to think of it, A headline such as Bishop's wife fights chief fetish priest over teenage girl would make the best reading of the century. She shuddered at the idea of a front-page picture of herself and whoever was the present chief fetish priest. She covered her face with both hands and sobbed. Then, when the flood of her tears had ceased, she walked to the bathroom and sponged her tear-stained face. "It must be now," she sighed. At that moment the church bell struck the first hour and she walked back to her bedroom. Mary sat on her bed, having tried for too long to get some sleep. Not wanting to disturb her parents by putting on the light, she sat quietly in the darkness. When she heard the church bell strike the midnight hour, she walked to the window, opened it and listened to the gentle lapping of the waves below. Sitting close by to shade as much of the light as possible, she turned the lamp on and, taking her diary from the drawer, she scribbled down into it the words that came flowing into her head. "Charles, Charles, each passing moment brings with it more loving thoughts of you, but I am confused. I know that I am very fond of you, and that I cannot look upon you simply as my doctor, but what exactly are you to me? I even wonder sometimes if my parents, and especially my father, approve of our close relationship. But if they part us, who else will care for me as much as you do? Who will go to such extremes to understand me as you will? Who else would help and even date a mentally deranged girl? But am I truly deranged? No, I am not. Yet something is very wrong with me. I am not sure what it is, but I feel strongly that it has an external cause. But can you believe this? 18 long years of my life have already passed so successfully, so smoothly and so happily that the limit of my joy and happiness seemed to be the sky. And even though I was perhaps not as close to my parents as an only child could be, I did not feel uneasy at any time. Yet in one moment, one sudden moment, one guilty Sunday when I felt I did not want to be at the church service, the light in my life was snapped, switched off in a moment like an electric light, blown out like a long candle standing in the way of a hurricane. For the first time I heard my own heart inside my chest thumping like the bass drum we beat at school. But as I rushed to the chapel it seemed to grow further and further away from me, and these feelings turned into the constant Sunday attacks. Try as I have done to help myself, I am still helpless. Tell me, God, what is wrong with me? Where have I sinned? Where? Mary began to sob. The tears flowed lavishly and helped to soothe her troubled mind. It was like a cleansing of her innermost worries and emotions. She took a deep breath and calm relief overtook her. Looking at the sinking moon, she asked, "Madam Moon, is Mary a lunatic?" There was no reply. She sat there for a long time lost in a series of musings. She thought about her ability to qualify for university and the speech she must make to the school. She thought about being in love with Charles and about her health, and found no answer. Just then the church bell struck the first hour and she returned to bed.